This is New York Nightly News with Chuck Scarborough. Live from Studio 3C in Rockefeller Center.
Well, there are so many different types of science and environmental studies, but do we truly understand how our planet works? One scientist and renegade naturalist says, no, we don't. He says most of the world is clinging to myths, folktales, and even the Bible when it comes to understanding nature and how to care for it. Dr. Daniel Botkin joins us now to talk about his new book, The Moon in the Nautilus Shell, Discordant Harmonies Reconsidered. Welcome, Dr. Botkin.
Roseanne, thanks very much for having me.
What sort of myths are you talking about?
The main myth is what's called the balance of nature, and that's the idea that the only thing that causes environmental change is human actions, human failings. And that's the opposite of how things really work. What we really know from modern science is that everything's always changing. The climate's always changing, populations of species are always changing. But your viewers may be surprised to know that most of our laws and policies that deal with the environment are based on this ancient idea, the balance of nature, that if you take people out of it, everything's constant.
But nature is constantly in discord in a way and changing. So
Yes.
How should this affect our public policies?
Well, you know, Hurricane Sandy is a really great example of the problem. And of course, our hearts go out to all the people who are suffering directly from it. But didn't we just hear on the news that the Congress has pushed back on the funding? Mm-hmm. So one thing we have to learn how to do is how do you deal with environmental risk? And you don't do it by putting those things off. That's another long story. Another lesson from Hurricane Sandy is about the power grid. It reminded us of what we were supposed to learn from the big blackout of 2003.
And what did we learn and what didn't we learn?
What we learned but forgot was that the power system, the grid, is ancient, you know, it's old, it's out of date, it's dangerous, and it's very likely to fail. And so we have to replace it. And another important problem, which your viewers probably don't know about, is food security. Having a reliable food supply. So it used to be, starting with the Great Dust Bowl in the 30s, after that we had a multiple-year supply of small grains stored. And then about 25 years ago, that all disappeared. So we don't have a food supply stored away in case there's the kind of environmental change we would not like.
So if we had a great drought or a great famine or some great catastrophe that would affect the crops, what sort of situation would we be in?
We'd be stuck. We would have to start looking abroad. And, you know, we expect in this high technology society that we can always solve every problem, but we can't. So we really need to get back to having stored grain for a number of years.
How much in this book is from your own personal observations and not necessarily scientific study?
Well, it's every aspect of my life because, you know, I'm an outdoors person, so I've loved walking around in the woods. I've studied elephants in Africa. I've worked in wilderness. So in the book, I tell a lot of stories, some of it about my scientific research, some of it about myself. I have a story. I have a pilot's license, so I talk about flying through a thunderstorm. And I'll talk about environmental risk. I do that one. And so it's a combination of personal experiences and long-term studies, because I've been in this as a science since 1964.
And with the powers of those years of observations, if we were to have a priority list in terms of how we are handling the planet, what would the top three be?
Okay, I think what's happened is that we've been focusing only on climate change. And so what we have to start focusing on now is invasive species that are threatening things, overfishing, over-harvesting of our natural resources, good water supply for the world. I would give those three, but I'd add a fourth, which is energy. But we have to do energy the right way.
And food, because you also mentioned that.
Yes, right.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting, something we should all learn from.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Now, the federal government